Hi, I'm Pete Lockett. Welcome to my iDrum Tabla course, mini Tabla course. These are the North Indian Tabla. I'm just going to play a little bit so you can hear what they sound like. The music in North India is one of the most rich rhythmic musics of the world, and these drums, the tabla, are one of the cornerstone instruments out of that whole repertoire. In this mini course of lessons, we're going to be looking mainly at the playing positions, playing strokes, and the way that the sounds on the drums are made, rather than specifically looking at the intricacies of the music system itself. So really kind of a way to get started with the sounds and strokes on the instrument. Just first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the drums. We have two drums, a bass drum and a treble drum. Now these are called Baya and Dina, which actually means left and right in Hindi. Even if you play them the other way round, they would still be called Baya and Dina. Sometimes this drum is also called the duggy, and sometimes the smaller drum is also called the tabla. Now the structure of the drums is pretty amazing, really. We can see underneath here that we have a ring around the bottom of the drum, and from that, this piece of animal gut, it's one continuous piece of animal gut, is sewn around through the head, back through the ring, through the head, through the ring, creating this sort of webbing, effect, holding the drum head in position. Now, it's a very complicated job making the head. The heads are usually made on the drum, and then the strapping is strapped in, and then after that the wooden tuning pegs are put in. We're going to be talking about tuning in a later lesson. The heads themselves are very interesting in construction. Here we have a tabla head from a larger drum, actually. We can see that there's on the top we have this rim here. Then we have the main skin with the black spot, which I'm going to talk about in a little while. Now inside there's another layer of skin as well. We can see clearly here inside. So it's a pretty complex construction of head. As I say, it's made on the drum, and then when it's actually on the drum, this section is cut out with a Stanley knife, and then the black spot is applied. Now the black spot is actually made from flour and iron filings, and is the better quality, the more rings it has. If we look at this drum here, we can see that there are a lot more rings, and these are created by different bits of the dough that are made and rubbed on with a stone, and then the head is constructed and then it's tuned. Basically, it's a resonating device. There are numerous resonating devices that you find on Indian drums. This type, which is dry and permanent. On some Indian drums, they'll make a dough from semolina and apply it for performance. On other Indian drums, there's an oily masala type mixture that's applied to the inside of the bass drum head, the bass of a double-ended folk drum, for example, and then the resonant sounds of the drum are sort of lowered, and the tuning is made more relevant to the music that they're playing. Now, the heads are very complicated in the way that they're made on the drum. The animal gut is sewn round, and then the strapping is put through, and it's then tuned with a tabla hammer. And again, I say we'll begin to talk about that a little bit later. The bass drum is similar in construction. It also has the ring on the bottom. Obviously, this needs to be tuned a lot lower, so we don't need to be worrying quite so much about having all the pegs to tune it up really, really high. Sometimes some drums have these smaller pegs that we can see here to just raise the pitch very slightly. We can also see that the black spot is not in the center of the bass drum, and that's mainly because of the glissando and the hand movement that that one uses whilst playing the instrument. The drums always come in a pair. Traditionally, back in the very old days, it's said that the drums were derived from a drum called the pakawaj, which is a double-ended Indian drum, similar head structure, and it's played in this way. The story is that it was cut in half and tabla was created. Normally this drum is tuned to the tonic note of whatever piece of music is being played. Now, the playing position is very important with these drums. The angle of the heads, where they are in relationship to your body. So if you look head on, I'm sitting pretty central to the drums, and the playing position is kind of like a bit like a scorpion, if you like. What you're not doing is lifting this arm up, or lifting this elbow out, or any funny things. It's kind of a natural sort of position to get playing the drums. This becomes a little bit tricky once we start to learn the strokes and we start to develop different techniques on the drum. But it's one very, very important thing that one focuses is on the playing position. So try and when you're working through yourself, trying to get the techniques and strokes down, really continue to focus on how you're sitting with the drums. Now, another important aspect of this is the angle of the drums. So some people will start playing and they'll have them like both in front of them like this, and obviously you can't really get to a good angle like this, bearing in mind your arms are coming down. So normally the treble drum is angled slightly away from you, as is the bass drum, but not by such a huge angle. Now, this is a very important aspect as well, is that when one's sitting on the floor cross-legged, the bass drum tends to move when you're playing because of the weight of the arm on the drum, and that is controlled by this part of your leg. We can see, by the way, they're sitting in the traditional rings. So the leg helps to control stop the drum moving, and also during performance, players will often be, you'll see players moving the drum in this fashion. So we're quite close to the drums, and now we're going to start looking at the first basic strokes on the instrument. Now, the Indian rhythmic system has a detailed set of phonetics and syllables with it. These are called bols, B-O-L-S, which comes from the Hindi word bolo, which basically means to speak. So if we look at our, first of all, look at our playing position, we're going to begin by looking at the bass tabla, the baya, and we're going to be looking at a stroke called ge. And this is created by, if you imagine you cup your hand around, say for example, a snooker ball or a tennis ball, and you just gently rest the wrist on the drum around this portion, so your fingers will be striking in here. Now, one thing I will add to this is that if you notice the black spot on this drum, I've got that position nearest to the small drum. Now that is the way they play the drums in Calcutta. Other districts in India have the spot furthest away from them, and different positions. But for this style, which is Calcutta Farrukhabad style of tabla playing, the black spot is nearest the small drum. So we're going to be striking in this area here, and another one of the cornerstones of Indian percussion technique is the way they divide their hands. So we have two striking units with each hand. We'll look at the right hand in a minute. To begin with the left hand, we have the three-fingered striking unit, and we have the one-fingered striking unit. And these will be striking the drum in our cupped position. So we're going to have 3, 1, 3, 1. Just a nice open tone. If there's too much weight on the drum, you won't be getting any resonance. What we're looking for to begin with is a nice resonant open sound, and we're not going to be looking into any glissando or pushed or pulled notes until much later on. So we want a good clear open tone. 3, 1, 3, 1. So, as I say, this is called ge. The next sound is on the treble tabla, the dyna, and D-Y-N-H-A, not as in American diner, of course. So we've got our hands divided into the 3-in-1 striking units again, and what we're going to do is we're going to strike on the black spot, which is called the gab, G-A-B, and we're going to have a very staccato note. 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. Now, as I say, this sound is called te. It brings one thing to light, and that is sometimes you'll hear like a little kind of like sticky sound of your fingers coming off the drum. Now, what tabla players use is, this is the Johnston's advert now, Johnston's baby powder. I prefer Johnston's myself, but you can choose whichever brand of talcum powder you prefer. What you need to do is just take a little bit of powder and apply it to your hands and the drums, and then you get rid of that sound. It's important not to use too much talcum powder because then it kind of sticks to the drum and ruins the resonance of the drum. So using these two sounds, we're going to look at the first line of example 1 of our exercise. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, te. Left, left, right, right. Left, left, right, right. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, te. 3, 1, 3, 1. 3, 1, 3, 1. You can see the fingering is the same for each hand. 3, 1, 3, 1. So now we're going to add a new sound, and this sound is on the bass tabla also, and this sound is called ke, and is the non-resonant stroke on this drum, and is played, the wrist stays in the same position, and it's just a flat muted stroke. Now you can spread the fingers out or play all 4 fingers together. So the choice is yours, whichever is most comfortable. It's very important to be relaxed, so you're not like really trying to play hard or overplay the note. So the next part of the exercise, exercise 1 that we'll look at, is line 3 of exercise 1. Ke, ke, te, te. Ke, ke, te, te. With the te stroke, it's very important that when you strike with the 3-fingered te, this finger is in the middle of the black spot. And when you strike with the 1-fingered te, this finger is in the middle of the black spot. Also notice how far into the drum I am. If I'm playing back here, it's a very different sound. If I'm too far forward, it's a different sound. We're looking for the staccato sounds. This sound actually is very, very poignant with tabla playing, especially with a lot of the fast rolling. A lot of the work is done on the black spot, which is why you get that staccato, sort of very defined 30-second rolling. So, ke, ke, te, te. Ke, ke, te, te. Ke, ke, te, te. So now we're going to look at the whole exercise that we've got so far example by example. Now this type of composition is called a KANJIRA. And basically, a KANJIRA is a theme and variation composition, and is really important when you're learning the tabla. You learn lots of different KANJIRAs, and we'll be looking at some in the course of these lessons. And each KANJIRA composition will look at different problems and different stroke combinations and different ways to develop your technique on the instrument. So we've only got our basic strokes, ge, ge, te, te, ke, ke, te, te. And pretty much they are the only strokes that can be used in a KANJIRA composition. There are lots of other different styles of composition, such as a laggy composition, which is a folk style theme and variation composition. There's a rela composition. Rela is kind of a Hindi for rail, which means a very fast rolling drum roll type composition. There are lots of fixed compositions that are like little paragraphs of rhythm, lots of intricate little rhythm things. And there are numerous different compositions within the tabla solo repertoire. These are aside from the basic grooves that one would play, which are called tals in North Indian music. And you have various tals and time cycles that one would play that are separate from these different styles of solo composition. So we're going to look at example 1, just using those strokes and what we've learnt so far. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te. So we're looking for just a very clear, open tone with the bass tabla, and we're not looking for any glissando techniques that you would hear within a lot of Indian rhythms that one is familiar with. These will be developed later. Also, in reference to that, it's another reason that the powder is so important. Besides the not sticking to the drums, the glissando and the movement of the drums is obviously aided with the talcum powder. So we're now going to look at example 2, which is variation 1 of the theme. Ge, ge, te, 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 ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ke, ke, te, 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 ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, 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 ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te, ke, ke, te, 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 ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, te, te. Don't worry to begin with about going too fast with these compositions. It's very important to get clarity at a slow speed, even if it's this type of tempo. Real clarity and precision with the strokes, and the speed will easily come later. We'll now look at variation 2. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. So now we'll go on to the final example. Now, the example that we've just looked at was 3, 3, 2, adding up to 8. So one of the simple methods that Indian rhythm composers will use is just to rearrange those. So 3, 2, 3. So ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ge, ge, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, 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 te. Ke, ke, te, te. Ge, ge, te, 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 te. So that's it for this time. Next time we're going to add some new strokes and develop some different kaida themes and begin to construct some ways of getting further into the instrument. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Do pop by my website, petelockett.com, and I'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Pete Lockett. Welcome to the second instalment of my guide to the very basics of North Indian tabla. Bear in mind that this instrument is a very complex instrument, and we're just looking at the basic sounds on the drum. To take the instrument further, you really need to find a teacher that can show you the instrument. Ideally, a teacher that's trained in North Indian classical music. So we're going to continue our look at the basic strokes. Remember, last week we had 3 strokes. We had the ge stroke, the open bass tone. We had the te stroke on the treble tabla, and we have the ke stroke on the bass tabla. Now we're going to add a new stroke to our repertoire, and this is called na. It's actually also sometimes called tar, and more on that later. So basically this is the characteristic sound that you would know from listening to tabla. This is the sound that would be tuned to the tonic or the keynote of any piece of music being played. Sometimes the fifth, but generally it's preferred if it's actually the keynote. So this sound is created in a very interesting way. It's a very interesting way of approaching striking a drum, and not something that you find on any other drums from different parts of the world. Let's begin. We'll just place our hand on the edge of the drum like this, so we can see our fingers adjust into the edge of the black spot. Now we're going to lift the first 2 fingers up like this. Okay, and leaving this finger, the middle finger, in the air, we're going to strike the rim of the drum with the first finger. It takes a little while to get used to doing this. It's kind of an unusual motion. It's an unusual way to strike a drum, but it will become more familiar to you as you spend time with it. Now, one of the important things about this stroke is the resting fingers. Remember, we only lifted 2 fingers up, leaving these 2 fingers on the edge of the drum. Notice that they're just on the edge of the black spot and remain on the drum when you strike the sound. Now, if those fingers weren't there, basically it would have a massive open tone like that. And I'll show you the relevance of the fingers by completely dampening the drum with my other hand whilst playing that stroke with my fingers off the drum. Absolutely nothing. Now, as I slowly move my finger out towards the edge of the drum, we'll begin to see that we get the optimum harmonic created, which will finally be created by the resting fingers. There's the ideal position. Now it's too resonant and open. Hear it dying? Nothing. So the position and the weight that you've got with these 2 fingers is of paramount importance in creating the sound. So just spend some time to begin with, not worrying about the composition that we're going to look at in a minute, but just playing the sound, even as quarter notes or minims or quavers or whatever you want, really. Notice how it's resonant and ringy and very woody. Actually, the shell of the tabla is very thick. It's solid wood, pretty much through to here. So you're hitting on the top of the wood. Another thing about the tabla is that the shell itself is solid wood right up to about here. So it's only the top part that's slightly hollowed out. An amazing construction of drum. In fact, the better quality the drum, the worse the finish is inside. They use those curved chisels and dig it out with a hammer. And they are the better quality drums. The cheaper drums are made with lathes on the inside. So obviously we can see this drum is made with a lathe on the outside, but the inside is finished by hand with a chisel, curved chisel. Now also we have these covers as well, which I haven't mentioned yet. See, this one is newer than that one. That's just a coincidence. Now these are very important. People often ask me, why are the drums covered? And obviously, in India it's very hot. There's often direct sunlight. It's really to keep the tuning, the tuning accurate. They're very, very temperamental drums with humidity change, or direct sunlight or heat, cold, different things. So pretty much it's to keep the tuning right. I mean, I tie them on just so it's easy. In performance, it's very important to, as a multi-percussionist, which I am, you can often get feedback by leaving this drum open to a mic because it's creating a feedback chamber. So I need to easily cover it up when I'm not playing it. I might only play it for 5-10% of any performance. So anyway, we're going to move on to our second composition, which is also a kaida, which remember from last time is a theme and variation composition. We're going to be using some of the same strokes that we did last time, but we're also going to be adding in our na stroke. So the syllables of the first line of our theme, ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Now this poses a very interesting problem in that you have to get from the te stroke into position with the fingers down, creating the harmonic to play the na stroke. So we're going from te to na. Sometimes it's good to split these components out. So I've just taken the left hand out and just played that so we can really concentrate on that movement. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. So to get across there smoothly without creating a squeak is really important. Again, that's where the powder comes in. And remember, we just take a little bit of powder, sprinkle a little bit on the bass tabla where your wrist is, and then move over to the small tabla. Certainly none of that. None of that with the powder. So you've got to be very careful not to put too much, because you're going to completely kill the tone of the head, because it'll all cake on the instrument. So back to the composition. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. So now we're going to look at line 3 of the theme, which is pretty much the same, but instead of gege, we've got keke. So we have ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, na, na. So now if we look at the whole theme from beginning to end, we'll have this. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na. Again, slowly work up to the speed. Don't rush in and feel you've got to play it fast for it to be valid. The most important thing is the clarity of the strokes. Now, gege and tete is the same as last time, 3-1, 3-1. So there's no difference there. It's also really important to have 3 ways to practice the material. You can speak it without playing it. You can play it without speaking it, and you can speak and play it at the same time. And they're all really important ways to begin to internalize all of these different sounds. A lot of it's about association, and you begin to associate this with ge and this with te and this with na, and it soon becomes second nature. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look at example 2, which is variation 1. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na. Ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, na, na, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na. Te, te, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na. Ke, ke, te, te, ke, ke, na, na, ge, ge, na, na, ge, ge, na, na. Now we're going to move on to variation 2. Basically, this is just by adding a gap into the last example. So we'll have ge ge te te ge ge na na, te te ge ge na na, ke ke te te ke ke na na, te te ge ge na na, ge ge te te ge ge na na, te te ge ge na na, ke ke te te ke ke na na, te te ge ge na na. Now we're going to move on to variation 3. Now this is going to involve a new stroke and a new pronunciation of a syllable. So previously we've had ke, which was the muted closed stroke on the bass tabla. Now basically any syllable beginning with K is going to be this stroke, depending on the composition and depending on the accent of the stroke within a composition. Sometimes different words are used. So for this particular example, ke is going to become ko, K-O. Now we've also got a new version of a syllable which is similar to the te stroke, but with all 4 fingers, and it's called ta. T-A, ko, ta, ko, ta. Ko, ta, ko, ta. We're now going to look at that in the context of variation 3. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, ko, ta, kotta, ge ge nana, ke ke te te, ke ke nana, kotta kotta, ge ge nana, ge ge te te, ge ge nana, kotta kotta, ge ge nana, ke ke te te, ke ke nana, kotta kotta, ge ge nana. Now we're going to move on to the next example, which is variation 4. We're just going to put the kotta kotta in a different place. So let's just look at the first line of variation 4. Ge ge te te kotta kotta, ge ge te te kotta kotta, ge ge te te kotta kotta. Notice that all the strokes are quite relaxed. It's not really rushing it, and I'm not pushing in, over accentuating things or playing with a great deal of tension. So it's really important to try and remain as relaxed as possible when you're playing these strokes. So now let's look at the whole of variation 4. Ge ge te te kotta kotta, ge ge te te ge ge na na, ke ke te te kotta kotta, ge ge te te ge ge na na, ge ge te te kotta kotta, ge ge te te ge ge now going to move on to the final variation of this small kaida. Now, bear in mind that kaidas, actually, when you learn in the traditional setting, can be 20, 30, 40, 50 examples, 50 different variations. So we're really looking at a quick shot synopsis of some of these ideas here. And remember that any composition can only include the actual strokes that are included in the actual theme of the kaida. So what we have here to conclude this kaida is what's called a T-high. Now, a T-high basically is a short rhythmic phrase or rhythmic cadence which is repeated 3 times, calculated so as to end on the first beat. So, for example, a small phrase repeated 3 times in 4/4 is a short T-high. Phrase repeated 3 times, we've ended on the downbeat. So here we have a very short T-high to conclude this, presupposing that we're in 4/4, which we are. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. So we've ended up on the first beat. 3, 4. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. Ge, ge, te, te, ge, ge, na, na, na. So next we're going to look at some new syllables that are created from the syllables that we actually have so far. So what happens with some of these combinations is that you get a new syllable created from combinations of the other syllables. So, for example, if we have the ge stroke and the na stroke together, we have da, D-H-A, da. If we have the ge stroke and the te stroke together, with either stroke, either the 3 or the 1 fingered variation, we have de, D-H-E. So we're just going to look at a couple of simple variations on this within a structure of another kaida. Okay, so we'll look at the first line of this kaida first of all. And the syllables are da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te, da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. And it'll be like this. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. 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 So now we're going to look at the theme for this kaida complete. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Ta, ta, te, 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 te. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Ta, ta, te, 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 te. Da, da, te, te, de, de, te, te. Da, da, te, 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 te. Da, da, te, 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 te. Ta, ta, te, 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 te. Da, da, te, 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 te. So now we'll go on to our first variation. Da, da, te, 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 ta, ta, te, 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 te. So we'll now look at the final variation for this lesson. This is variation 2. The syllables are da, da, te, 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 da, te, 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 ta, ta, te, 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 da, te, 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 da, da, te, 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 ta, te, 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 ta, ta, te, 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 ta, te, 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 te. So also notice that the bass tabla with the da is also being configured in the same way as the guest strokes from the previous kaidas, 3-1. See you next time, and we'll move on to some new strokes. Hi, I'm Pete Lockett. Welcome to the third edition of our brief look at tabla strokes and playing techniques. We're going to add a new syllable straight away today for our lesson, and it's going to be the syllable T, T-I, not T-E-A. So this syllable is played with the middle finger. So it's the finger that is in the air for the stroke that we learnt last time, which was na, and sounds like this. So that's the na stroke, created with the first finger playing on the rim of the drum. Now T is the middle finger coming down and striking on the edge of the black spot. It's quite similar to te, but a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to show you the difference. Here are the te strokes. Very staccato and clear. The T stroke is a little bit more muted, a little bit more muffled. It's a little bit difficult to get the strength in the finger. Notice this finger is staying in the air. So now we're just going to look at some simple exercises combining the na stroke and the T stroke. So we're just going to use the right hand for now, and we're going to have na, T, na, T. Na, T, na, T, na, T, na, T. Notice that this finger, or these two fingers, are still resting on the edge of the black spot. Now we're going to have the next variation, which is variation 2, and is na na ti, na na ti, na ti. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Na na ti, na na ti, na ti, na na ti, na na ti, na ti. You can still hear the T stroke singing out through those patterns. It's really important to focus on getting strength in this stroke. So variation 3, na ti, na na ti, na na ti. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So when you begin to play these strokes, after a while, your hand will become tired. So it's important not to, pull any muscles or, overstress yourself, because this is a very strange hand movement. So be sure that you're not going to be, overworking your arm. So have little rests and come back to it and slowly build the strength up in these muscles over a period of time. So we're now going to look at variation 4, which will begin with the T stroke. T na na ti, na na ti na, ti na na ti, na na ti na, ti na na ti, na na ti na, ti na na, na na ti na. So we're going to now move on to example 5, and we'll begin with 2 na strokes for this example. Na na ti, na ti, na na ti, 3, 2, 3. Na na ti, na ti, na na ti, na na ti, na ti, na na ti. So now we're going to bring in the bass tabla and the ge stroke. We're going to go through the same 5 examples, but we're going to be adding some bass strokes to make the rhythm a little bit more interesting. So example 1, da ti, na ti, da ti, da ti, na ti, da ti. Remember that da is ge plus na together. Remember that in example 1, just with the right hand, we have na ti, na ti, na ti, na ti. Now we have da ti, na ti, da ti, da ti, da ti, da ti, da ti, da ti. For a very simple rhythm, it's very effective, and you should be able to get some control of that pretty quickly from the lesson. So next we're going to look at example 2 with the bass drum. Remember that we had 3, 3, 2. Na na ti, na na ti, na ti, na na ti, na na ti, na ti. Now with the bass drum. Da da ti, da da ti, da ti, na na ti, da da ti, da ti. da da ti, da da ti, da ti, na na ti, da da ti, da ti, da da ti, da da ti, da ti, na na ti, da da ti, da ti. So you'll notice that this was twice the length of the original example, and what I'm using there is something that called Tully and Cully, and I'm just going to briefly explain to you what that is. Basically, Tully and Cully means sort of accented and non-accented sections in a composition or a time cycle. Empty and full is another literal translation. Now, these uses of Tully and Cully are relevant with some of the clapping cycles that you'll see in Indian music, where there are people sitting on stage clapping time with their fingers, with claps, and also with waves. And basically the Tully section, which is the accented or full section, would be represented by claps or proper finger counts, and the Tully section, the empty section, would be represented with waves. So, for example, the main time cycle you find in North India, the 16-beat tintal cycle, is da din din da da din din da na tin tin ta ta din din da da din din da da din din na tin tin ta ta din din da da. So you see that in that clapping cycle there is a wave. Now, as I said, the wave represents the Cully section of the time cycle or composition within it. So the way that transpires on the tabla directly is that during the Cully section there's no open bass tabla sound. So if we were to look at that rhythm, da din din da da din din da na tin tin ta 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 din din da da din din da da din din da na tin tin ta ta din din. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16. So you can see that there's a section where there's no bass drum being played, open bass drum being played in the time cycle. Now this also works for the compositions that we've been looking at so far, the kaidas that we've studied in the last two lessons. If you look back at them, you'll see that there are sections in the beginning of the second half of the composition where there's no bass drum, open bass drum being played. And it's the same with this. We've got no bass drum to begin with in the second half. So we have da da ti da da ti da ti da da ti da da ti da ti. Cully. So now we're going to move on to our next variation, which is variation 3. And this is a slight rearrangement of the 3-3-2. And here we have 2-3-3. Da ti da da ti da da ti ta ti da da ti da da ti da ti da da ti da da ti ta ti da da ti da da ti. And I can't overemphasize enough that the important thing in all of this is to get as clear a tone as possible and not worry about developing speed. The speed will come later when you've got everything really clear at a slow tempo. So now we'll move on to example 4, which begins with the T stroke. And finally, for this short section, we're going to move on to example 5. Remember, that was 3-2-3 from the examples that we only used the right hand in. Da da ti da ti da da ti ta ta ti da ti da da ti da da ti da ti da da ti ta ta ti da ti da. So we're now going to move on to a new stroke. Now this stroke is called tun. Now a lot of these strokes actually sound, as they are played. So the sound of the drum is very similar to the syllable that one speaks. So tun. Very open bell-like tone, sometimes reinforced with the left hand. So now we're going to integrate that with some of the other strokes, such as na and ti, and we'll have a small exercise that will sound like this. Ta ti ta ti ta tunna ta ti ta ti ta tunna ta ti ta ti ta tunna ta ti ta ti ta tunna. So this stroke, it looks like it's kind of a sideways karate chop, but it's not. There's not that much movement, and it's created with the front portion of the finger just coming down and resting on the edge of the shell, actually. Now you don't want to be traveling too far across to this side of the drum, like this. So it's, with all of the tabla stuff, actually, it's pretty much within a very small area. A lot of the action is completed in a very small area of the drum. And again, you don't want to hit this too hard, because it very soon becomes a very ugly sound. So we're going to look at more of that sound in the next edition, where we're going to involve it in a composition called a laggy. So we're going to wind up this lesson with a little look at the bass tabla and some of the glissando techniques that one might find idiomatically on the drum. Now, to my mind, there are three main techniques that are most commonly used, or that you see most often. The first one is the pulling technique. You can see that the sound is being opened out and pulled and then closed with the wrist. Now, I will mention that the wrist is very gently on the drum. It's not really digging in and creating a lot of weight on the drum. It's a bit like a hovercraft, sort of moving around on the skin, very very gently and playing with the tone. The next technique one might find is the pushing technique. So you can see that's a very fast movement, kind of slow motion. I'm grabbing and playing the stroke. This is a technique that you'll find quite often in a lot of folk drumming. When the drum is in this position, and you can really push down towards the floor much quicker than you can on the tabla. Obviously the tabla is not quite as stable as a drum in that position, and then you've got what you could call like a pandular sort of motion, or a slow glissando technique. So it's really important to begin to understand how classical Indian tabla players would use these glissando techniques correctly in the idiom and in a musical way. Great tabla players such as Zakir Hussain, Bikram Ghosh, Pandit Shankar Ghosh and Indo Chatterjee, they're all absolutely fantastic points of reference to listen, and it's incredibly important to really listen in detail to how these players play the music, play the drums and the type of glissando techniques that they would use. that's all for this time. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget you can visit me at petelockett.com, and I shall see you next time. Hi, welcome to lesson 4 in my brief look at tabla strokes and an introduction to making a sound on the drums. Now remember, last time we had a new stroke which was called tun and was the open stroke. Very resonant and ringing like a bell. So we're just going to start a composition now using that stroke, and the composition itself is called laggy. Now laggy, like kaida, is also a theme and variation style of composition, so there are lots of different sorts of laggies and lots of different sorts of kaidas in various time signatures and time cycles. So this one again is in 4/4 or 16 beat time cycle called tintal. So we're going to have a new theme, and the theme is da ti da na da tun na na, da ti da na da tun na na, and it will sound like this: da ti da na da tun na na, 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 da ti da na da tun na na. So you'll notice in there that with the tun stroke I was using the ke stroke at the same time. Tun na na. Now this is very common that one will add the ke stroke to the open tun stroke, but it's optional. So if you didn't want to add the ke stroke, then that's fine. It actually, for me, adds a little bit of definition to a stroke that's quite resonant and bell-like. Now, so far, we only have the first part of this composition, the tully section, which has the resonant open bass drum in it. Now we want to move on, and we want to have the whole of the theme, which includes the tully section. Remember from lesson 3 that the tully section is the section that doesn't have the resonant bass drum in it. So the whole of the theme will sound like this: da ti da na da tu na na, ta ti da na da di na na. So now we have another syllable that we're going to have to explain. Now, din in this instance is the open tun stroke, as we've already looked at, but with the ge stroke together at the same time. Din. It's very common that when one goes towards the cully section, one doesn't have the bass drum. So the bass drum is taken out leading to the cully section, and leading to the tully section, the full section where there is the resonant bass drum, sometimes the bass drum will be present. And it essentially leads to a displacement of the cully section, in that it will come in slightly earlier and finish slightly earlier. So here's din with ge and tun. The tun stroke is exactly the same with din as in tun. That was din, and now tun. Exactly the same apart from the left hand. So here's the theme: da ti da na da tu na na ta ti da na da di na na da ti da na da tu na na ta ti da na da di na na. Ti da na da di na na. When we start to hear that played at that speed, we start to see the relationship between the laggy composition and a folk style of playing. Remember that laggy is a folk style theme and variation composition. So let's move on to variation 1. Da tu na na da tu na na da tu na na da tu na na da ti da na da tu na na ta ti da na da di na na ta tu na na ta tu na na ta tu na na ta tu na na da ti da na da tu na na ta ti da na da di na na. Now you'll notice that with some of the care strokes, I'm playing just with the first finger or in a slightly different way. Don't worry about that. You just play with the full care stroke with the open hand. It's just an affectation of once you've been playing for a while, sometimes you'll be, filling in a slightly different way, in a way that you might do with grace notes as a drum set player, or in different styles that you might bring in with the drum set. So let's move on to variation 2. This is comprised of 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, adding up to 16. The 3 is da tu na. And the 4, da da tu na. And the whole thing will sound like this. Da tu na, da tu na, da tu na, da tu na, da da tu na, da ti da na, da tu na na, da ti da na, da di na na, da tu na, da tu na. Ta tu na, ta tu na, ta ta tu na, ta ti da na, da tu na na, ta ti da na, da di na na. tunna, da tunna, da tunna, da tunna, da tunna. It's really good to be able to speak it, you know, at whatever speed you finally get to play it. Da tunna, 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 da tunna. So let's move on to the next example. So this is comprised of 6-6-4. So instead of 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4, and the 6 is da ti da da tunna. Da ti da da tunna, da ti da da tunna, da da tunna, da ti da na da tunna na, da ti da na da tunna na, da ti da da tunna, da ti da da tunna, da da tunna, da ti da na da tunna na, da ti da na da di na na. You'll notice with a lot of the strokes that they're quite evenly balanced. Things aren't really singing out and are accented unless it's intentional. So the tun stroke sits in very nicely. It's very well balanced, and it's not, which sounds, you know, we'd all agree it sounds pretty hideous. So it's all about making the sounds blend and be very musical together. We're now going to move on to the final section of this laggy, and it's a slightly longer T-high, which is sometimes known as a chakradar, which kind of means full circle. Also means like a T-high of T-highs, which is, you know, a T-high of T-highs within the whole structure. And the whole composition will sound like this. Da ti da na da tu na na, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da. Da ti da na da tu na na, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da, da ti da na da tu na na da. So a couple of things to explain here. First of all, I'm clapping a time cycle, which is called Adi Tal. It's actually a South Indian time cycle. It's a good instant reference to be able to be able to work these compositions out to. You could alternatively use a metronome and just set it to an 8-beat click. So every first beat of the 8 is accented, so you can clearly hear where everything is sitting in relationship to the composition. The structure of this is slightly longer than some of the other stuff we're looking at, and also when you get a longer rhythmic composition, a T-high, some of the fixed compositions that are like little rhythmic paragraphs and various things like that, the Tali Kali concept is kind of suspended in a sense, in that everything just goes all the way across the bar lines and across the composition until you land on the first beat. Now a T-high, as I mentioned earlier, is a composition that's a cadence that's repeated 3 times calculated so as to land on the first beat. And a chakradara is the same thing. It's almost like a big T-high that's calculated over a long period of time, calculated so as to end on the first beat. Now this is actually, each section is 11 beats long. So if you add that up, you've got 33. So when it's arrived on the 33rd note, that is actually the downbeat of the whole section. Actually, if I speak it faster, it'll be easier to understand the actual structure of the composition. Dati da na da tu na na dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da dati da na da tu na na da. So you can immediately see the shape a lot easier when it's played faster. Again, the notation is downloadable, so it's going to probably be a wise idea to download the notation and look at the syllables. I've written it in a very clear and easy way to understand, so you can see how the whole thing's put together. And it will sound like this. Da ti da na da tu na na da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na da da ti da na da tu na na 1. That's the 1 there. You've ended on the 1. Now, a lot of these kaidas and different compositions, one learns, and we learn to conclude them with a T high and a different type of ending. So it's a very common practice, and it's also builds up a good deal of material that you can use when playing and accompanying and developing solo material for yourself later on. So we're going to finish off this lesson by looking at a couple of simple ways to get some grooves going. Some very simple syllables using what we've already learnt, and the syllables are da, ti, ge, na. We've learnt all those syllables so far, and if we just put them together in a line, da ti ge na, da ti ge na, da ti ge na, da ti ge na. Notice the left hand, it's going 3, 1. Da ti ge na, da ti ge na. So it's continually moving. So this is the first line of example 1 of the patterns using da ti ge na in the notation. Da ti ge na, da ti ge na, da ti ge na, da ti ge na. So now we're just going to off-place it very slightly in the second half. Instead of dati gena, we'll start with the gena. So we'll have gena dati, gena dati. Gena dati, gena dati. So if we put those two together, we'll have this. Dati gena, dati gena, gena dati, gena dati. Left hand is still 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1. Dati gena, dati gena, gena dati, gena dati. Dati gena, dati gena, gena dati, gena dati. So these are quite useful exercises. It builds your strength up and can be a useful way to begin to you know, get some different rhythms happening. There are a few more variations in the notes, the downloadable notes. Remember that the bass drum is going 3-1, 3-1 throughout that whole thing. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I shall see you next time. Hi, welcome to lesson 5 in my little synopsis look at tabla strokes and how to make a sound on the drums. You notice that I'm standing up in this lesson. It's really important that as a modern percussionist you find ways to integrate any instrument that you play into your setup, and for me it's very practical to have tabla on a table playing and bring in other percussion instruments and other things around me. It does create some problems in that sometimes the rings on the table slip, and so there are a few ways around that problem. One of the ways around that is to you can gaffer tape the rings to the table and then cover it in a cloth, or find some sort of way to stop the drums slipping around on the table, because it's much more harder to control the drums with your legs when you're not sitting cross-legged. Now we're going to move on today to a composition called a rella. Now rella basically equates to, it kind of means rail in Hindi, and there's a fast rolling sort of composition that you'll hear, particularly with staccato notes on the gab, on the black spot. Similar to this, very fast sort of rolling, densely packed notes on the drum. So we're going to start to look at a rella composition. The first thing it will raise is the concept of notes and syllables. And one of the familiar problems when one is starting to learn the tabla is that it soon becomes apparent that there are lots of ambiguous syllables that mean more than one stroke. So for example, we've learnt this stroke as the na stroke. This can also be called ta. Similarly, there's the din stroke that we've learnt so far that was the open tun and ge. But there's another din stroke which is played on the inner ring, similar to na, but a little bit more bass end frequencies in there, as opposed to the na. So we have this stroke, which is called tin, T-I-N, with the bass drum, ge, open stroke. You have a syllable called din. Now we're going to be looking at that a little bit later, but just in summary regarding the ambiguity of the syllables, because it does confuse a lot of people, and they kind of say, well, why is there not a specific set of syllables? And I always say it's very similar to, you know, if you're starting out learning the English language, for example, and if I was just to say the word through, that without a context you wouldn't know whether it was through the window or through the ball. But as soon as you've got a context, you're going to know exactly what that word is. And similarly with the tabla, strokes become obvious once they're context related. So once it's within a context, within a composition, it becomes pretty obvious which stroke is which. There are numerous ambiguous tabla strokes, and as you get further into the instrument, you would start to come across a lot of them. Now we're going to have another one now involving the te stroke that we've looked at so far. So before we had te, 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 3, 1, 3, 1. Now, what we're going to have is a new syllable for the one-fingered te, just for the context of this rella, and also numerous other rellas, but in this context alone, and it's re, R-E, te, re. te, re, te, re. And the reason for this particular syllable being changed is that when you start to speak and play faster, then it rolls off the tongue much quicker. And so it becomes much more easier to use and employ instead of te te, which is very difficult to say fast. So we're going to have a basic rella. And we're only going to be using the closed strokes on the left hand and the various strokes that we know already on the right hand. So the first line of the theme is like this. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, ta, ka. 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 Te re ke te taka taka, te re ke te taka taka. Te re ke te taka taka, te re ke te taka taka, te re ke te taka taka, te re ke te taka taka. So one problem that immediately arises from this is that after te re ke te, you've ended here on the three-fingered te. Now you've got to come to this position with the fingers resting here for the ta stroke. Now, there's another ambiguity there that we've had. That was na before. For the context of this composition, this is also going to be ta. So one of the things to practice to get this smooth, te, na. Three-fingered te, rim na. And you have to do it without getting any squeaking or different sort of strange sounds coming out of the drum. So this is pretty much the whole meat of the rella, and it's really good, as I've said in many of the lessons, to be very precise and to be practicing this at a slow tempo and not worry about speed for now. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, ta, ka. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, ta, ka. Now the second line. Ta, ka, te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. Ta, ka, te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. Taka te reke te taka, taka te reke te taka. So like I say, this is leading towards a composition called a rella, which is rail, very fast drum roll type composition. So if we look at the whole theme, we have this. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, ta, ka, ta, ka. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, ta, ka, ta, ka, te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. Te re ke te taka 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 te re ke te taka. So you can see it's really important also to be able to speak it and play it. You really begin to internalize how the syllables and the strokes fit together. So you can begin to see that it's really like that rail, like that train. The same thing a little bit faster. Again, all of the elements of this rella, it's again theme and variation. So all the variations are based on exact syllables that we find in the theme. So, variation 1. Te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, 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 te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. So you can see as well, everything's very clear. All the notes are very clear and coming out, you know, very staccato and accurately. See, you don't want... It's not going to happen. So really concentrate on the very clear strokes, and that will only be really achieved successfully at a slow tempo. Variation 2. Te, 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 ke, te, ta, ka, te, re, ke, te, ta, ka, te, 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 ke, te, ta, ka, te, re, ke, te, ta, ka. Again, working at the very, very sharp definition of every single individual stroke. Example 3 is 3-3-2 to begin with. The 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Te re ke te taka, te re ke te taka. with all of these components that we find in these compositions, you can easily strip them all out and have little individual things to practice and you know, build up your repertoire. As we see with what we've learned already so far, all the little components fit together, 3-3-2, 3-2-3, 2-3-3, whatever sort of configurations are there to put together to come up with different variations on the theme. So variation 3. So this is divided 3-3-2. Let's look at the 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Terekete taka, terekete taka. So we have 3-3-2. All of these little units, as within all the other kaidas and things that we've looked at so far, can be taken out and practiced in isolation as separate little things as well. And we immediately begin to see how all of these things have been put together with the themes and the variations, and how little different length segments of the variations have been compiled and composed and juxtaposed to make a nice flow of interesting rhythm changes. So let's look fully at example 3. Terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka. 1. There we're back to the 1. So that's one cycle of variation 3. Now I'll play it around a few times. Terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka, terekete taka. Terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka. So you can begin to see why it's called a rella, or like a train kind of moving fast. So we're going to look at variation 4. It's quite common now. We're starting to make these compositions a little longer. It's quite common that towards the end they'll have a few compositions or a few variations in there that become simpler, so it's all settled down a little bit before they might play a T-high to conclude it. So it's very simple. Taka, terekete taka, taka, terekete taka. So going back again, reinforcing the point that the speed only comes after you've got clarity. So if it starts to feel a bit messy when you speed it up, always pull it back down and you know, settle it down before you try and speed up again. The other thing that's really important is to practice with a metronome and really make sure that everything's locked in, comfortable at you know, the tempo that you've got to, and also it's a good way to have some sort of diary of development. So you know, you've got something up to 80 BPM, you know, you'll have that in your diary on January the 3rd or whatever, and then when you look back in 2 years time, January, and you've got up to 120, even though you might not feel that you've developed, you can look back and say, actually, you know, that's quite a lot faster than I was that period of time ago. So we're going to finally wind this composition up with a short T high, and it will be like this. Terekete taka taka taka, terekete taka da. te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. 2, 3, 4. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. 2, 3, 4. Te re ke te taka taka taka, te re ke te taka da. 2, 3, 4. Finishing on the 1. So we're going to move on to some other rhythms. Now, you remember at the beginning of the lesson, we were looking at the tin stroke. Now we're going to focus in on this stroke now. It's kind of similar to the tun stroke in some aspects, in that you have, you know, it's got some bass end frequencies in there. Now, it's very different than the na stroke on the rim. That's the sharp na stroke. And the tin stroke. Now, if I was to do 2 of each, for example, you'll really hear the difference. You can hear that it's got a lot of bass frequencies and is really quite a warm sound in comparison to the very sharp staccato na sound on the rim. Now, these two sounds are really the cornerstone of groove playing in all of tabla, both classically and within the folk idiom, just by using these two sounds. For example, let's look at the main time cycle from North India, 16-beat time cycle called tintal, and it's like this, using these 2 strokes. Now, the main body of the rhythm is coming from that 2 strokes on each sound, on the na, on the tin, but it's offset by 1 note. So it's on, off, off, on, off, on. So we're getting an off the beat type of thing, and that's one of the things that's very important listening to Indian rhythm and Indian grooves, is that one will hear 1, 2, 3, 4. You're hearing it on the beat, whereas it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's off the beat. So if you hear it in the wrong place, everything sounds even more complicated than it actually is. And when you do get deeply into Indian rhythm, tabla playing, and Carnatic music from the south of India as well, it's all very, very complicated rhythmically and interesting. So the main time cycle, tintal, is derived from those strokes. That's the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We can see there we've got the tully-cully structure in, which you'll hear much more easily if I play that slightly faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So using these notes, we're going to look at some simple ways to play some grooves. Of course, you could begin to sort of do any sort of combinations between the 2 sounds, but we're going to look at we'll finish off today with one simple one. We're just going to have 1 on the na and then 3 on the tin. Na, tin, 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 na, tin, tin, tin. So now we're going to add some bass drum notes with the open ge sound on that. We'll have da, tin, 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 na, din, din, tin. Da, din, din, din. Na, din, din, din. It's really important when you're playing the grooves to get a nice woody sound from the na stroke. So that's all for today. We're going to come back next time and we're going to have the Delikaida. So get ready for the Delikaida. Drop me an email over at my website, petelockett.com, and I'll see you next time. Hi, welcome to episode 6 of my brief look at the basic sounds and techniques on the North Indian tabla. You can go back over the previous 5 issues and look at the different strokes and some of the different combinations that we've covered so far. Now, we're going to be going a little bit deeper today, and we're going to look at a composition, another Kaida composition, which remember is a theme and variation composition. This is a Delhi Kaida. India's tabla styles are pretty much based on different areas. So, for example, you have the Delhi style, you have the Calcutta style, different styles of tabla playing. Actually, they're called gharanas. So it's the Delhi gharana, the Benares gharana, the Lucknow gharana, Calcutta gharana, and so on. So we can look at this Delhi Kaida. Like I say, it's a little bit further on from where we were, but it should easily be within your grasp if you've stayed up with me so far on everything that we've covered and all the sounds that we've looked at, because they're all in this composition. So I'm going to go straight into the composition, and first of all I'll just speak it very slowly, the first half of the theme. Da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te. So the only syllable in there actually that you would not have heard before is ga, which in this instance is the one-fingered ge stroke. So remember that anything beginning with K is the closed sound on the bass tabla. Anything beginning with G, g, ge, god, G-A-D, they're all the open bass strokes on the tabla. So, da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te. Now remember, last time we looked at te and re with the different syllables, but we are still playing te, te, 3, 1. So it's te, te, ke, te, 3-fingered te. Da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te. Second line, da, ti, da, ga, tu, na, ke, na. Da, ti, da, ga, tun, na, ke, na. So both of those lines together, which make up the first half, the tully portion of the theme. Da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te. Da, ti, da, ga, tu, na, ke, na. And the second half, remember the second half is the Kali, so the first half of the second half will not have any open resonant bass drum strokes in it. So the second half will be ta, ti, ta, ka, na, ta, te, re, ke, te. And then the final line, da, ti, da, ga, di, na, ke, na. Remember that din in this instance will be ge plus tun. Din, na, ge, na. 3-1 with the left hand, with the bass drum strokes. So the whole composition, da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te, da, ti, da, ga, tun, na, ke, na, ta, ti, ta, ka, na, ta, te, re, ke, te, da, ti, da, ga, di, na, ge, na. Da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te, da, ti, da, ga, tu, na, ke, na. Ta, ti, ta, ka, na, ta, te, re, ke, te, da, ti, da, ga, di, na, ge, na. Na da te ke te da ti da ga tu na ken ta ti ta ka na ta te ke te da ti da ga di na ken ta ti da ga na ta te ke te da ti da tu na ken na ta ti ta ka na ta te ke te da ti da ga di na ken na. Remember that di na ken na will lead to the tully back to the beginning where there's the bass drum, resonant bass drum present, and tu na kena will lead to the cully where the bass drum is taken out, or the resonant strokes on the bass drum are taken out. What would normally happen in this type of rendition in a classical solo setting is that they would play kind of like this. I mean, particularly at the beginning of a tabla solo, they might start out, for example, by playing basic time cycle very slowly. They'd move on to a composition called peshkar, which is a very open, resonant sort of theme and variation composition, basically like di din na da din na da ti da tu na ta ka da din na da ti da tu na ta tu na ta ka din na ta ka ti ta ka din na ka din ta ka da din na da ti da din na. It's a very open, resonant sort of composition. They might start with that, develop that a little bit, like an invocation or an opening, and then they'd move on back to the time cycle, the regular time cycle that we looked at last time. Then they might move on to some kaidas, different kaidas with maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 variations, back to the time cycle, another kaida, and then move on into the solo in different ways. They would speed up the rhythm. They would start to play fixed compositions, which are almost like little fireworks of rhythmic work. Little things like this that they'll begin to interject into the solo. Then they'll move on to the time cycle again, then back to the fast rhythmic work, the rella, and build up to a big crescendo. And it would all be accompanied by a melodic player playing a repetitive melodic cycle called a nagma, round and round, that all the rhythm work would be pitched against. It's quite by contrast in South India, where you'll have someone sitting on the stage clapping the time cycle. Now, with these kaidas, when they would first introduce them, one of the ways that they might begin to play this kaida, for example, is that they would play at single speed, 1.5 times speed, and then double speed. So, for example, this is something we can look at later, but just to show you, this is how one might approach playing a kaida traditionally. So we've got the tempo here. That's the double speed that we're aiming for. Da ti da ga na da te de ke te da ti da ga tu na ke na. But they would be playing upper speed from there. Da ti da ga na da te de ke te da ti da ga tu na ke na da ti da ga na da. ti da ga na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na ke na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na ke na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na ke na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na ke na da ti da ga na da te da ti da ga tu na ke na da. When they would get to this position, having gone through the single 1.5 times the speed, exactly as it is, but 1.5 times the speed, and then double, then they would move on to the variations at the double speed. So we're going to just look at a few simple variations that one might encounter during this type of KANJIRA. Normally, and we haven't really done this exactly in this way so far, normally the first variation that one would find would be called the Dora, which really involves repeating the first line 3 times and the second line once, and then the Kali of the whole thing. So our first line was Dati Daga Nada Tedikete. So we'd have that 3 times, and the second line, Dati Daga Tunakena, once. And it would be like this. Da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga tu na ke na ta ti ta ga na ta te re ke te ta ti ta ga na ta te re ke te da ti da ga na ta te re ke te da ti da ga di na ke na. One of the very important things about this composition is the tedekete needs to be really poke out and be very clear. The next thing they would do is repeat the second half of the first line 3 times instead of the whole of the first line. So dati daga nada tedekete. Nada tedekete is the second half. You'd have that 3 times. Dati daga nada tedekete nada tedekete nada tedekete da daga nada tedekete dati daga tuna kenna. And then the whole thing again as the Kali, which remember will have no bass drum in the first half of that repeat. Da ti da ga na da te re ke te na da te re ke te na da te re ke te da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga tu na ke na ta ti ta ka na ta te re ke te na ta te re ke te na ta te re ke te da ti da ga na ta te re ke te da ti da ga di na ke na. So you'll notice as well, when I'm doing the Kali section of these compositions, I'm using na and ta for the same syllable. Na, ta, te, re, ke, te. And again, that's because it's derived context-wise from the first half. So in the first half, we have na, da. So the second half will be na, ta. So again, all these things become a lot clearer the more compositions and kaidas and different things that you start to learn on the instrument. So let's look at variation 3. The next thing commonly they would start to do is to put gaps into the composition. So for example, we'd have da, ti, da, ga, na, da, te, re, ke, te, da. Da ga na da te de ke te da ti da ga na da te de ke te da ti da ga tuna kena ta ti ta ka na da te de ke te da ta ka na da te de ke te da ti da ga na da te de ke te da ti da ga dina kena da ti da ga na da te de ke te da da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga tuna ke na ta ti ta ka na ta te re ke te ta ta ka na ta te re ke te da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga di na ge na. Again, what would happen after this? There'd be numerous, rhythmic movements. You might get 7 plus 7 plus 2 and lots of different ways to begin developing the kaida more. We're going to sort of fast track right to the end. What they would do again before you get to the very end and the concluding chakradar or final rhythmic T-high big composition 3 times is they'd bring it back down into quite a simple level just so it becomes settled before the conclusion. So we're just going to look at variation 4, and often when you get to these variations it's the last part of the theme, the tunakena, that becomes more emphasized. So we have da ti da ga tuna kena da ti da ga tuna kena da ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga tuna kena ta ti ta ga tuna kena ta ti ta ga tuna kena ta ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga di na kena ta ti da ga tuna kena ta ti da ga tuna ta ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga tuna ken ta ti ta ga tuna kena ta ti ta tuna kena ta ti da ga na da te re ke te da ti da ga di na kena ta. Now this phrase dati daga tunakena is actually very common and is really useful in developing playing on the tabla. You hear it a lot, particularly in classical tabla players' hands. So we're going to move on to the final variation, which is another longer composition, another chakradar, as we said from one of the previous lessons, a long composition repeated 3 times, calculated so as to end on the first beat. So basically this is devised of 3 groups of 7 plus a gap. Okay, so you've got 7, 7, 7, which is 21, plus a gap, 22. So if you repeat that 3 times, you have 66, okay? Minus the gap, which wouldn't repeat on the 3rd time, wouldn't be included on the 3rd time, because the last note would be the downbeat. So without the gap, you have 65. So the 65th note is the downbeat. So 7, 7, 7 gap, 7, 7, 7 gap, 7, 7, 7 with the number 7 of the 3rd group of 7 of the 9th group of 7 becoming the downbeat. Yes, lovely. So the phrase, the 7 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. So that repeats 3 times plus the gap. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Da ti da ga na da te na da te da. Again, all the syllables are clearly included in the things before. The notation is downloadable there, or is it there? Is it there? Anyway, somewhere on this page, the notation is downloadable. So, a little bit faster. That last note being the downbeat and the continuation of playing time within the time cycle. So we're going to finish the whole look at this little mini series with a few obvious tips from with the drums. Obviously, keep them out of direct sunlight and away from heat. Keep the covers on them, and actually, what I tend to do is get stronger hard covers that I put over the top that you can tie on, or I tend to use Velcro to secure the drums. I mean, I tend to keep hold of the covers actually, and this cover, tatty as it is from my first ever set of tablas, and I kept it ever since. They're amazing. It's quite romantic, but there you go. Keep it away from water, substances that are going to damage the head. These are really fragile heads, and also if you sweat a lot when you play, have a towel or something, and try not to, because basically the spots will become damaged by any sort of water penetration. Now, don't use too much talcum powder either. As I said earlier, that tends to cake the drum and gets kind of stuck on there. I mean, you can there's some talc on here that you can see. You can scrape it off. Sometimes what happens with the drums, even with new drums when you buy them, is the black spot. If you can see, it's got lots of little islands in there. Sometimes they come loose and the drums start to buzz. There's not a whole lot you can do. If you can find that individual little spot that is buzzing, you might be able to put a tiny bit of super glue on it. Chances are you're not going to be able to do that without completely ruining the resonance of the drum. So it's proceed with caution on that. But chances are you probably need to get a new head or a new drum anyway. So you could get that replaced, in Southall, for example, at Jazz Musicals, which is a store that I'd recommend for looking at tablas. If you're in India, get them from Mukta Das in Calcutta, because they're really great drums. Get a good strong case for them, nice and padded, and it's someone kicking them on the train or something like that. You don't want that. Don't hit them with sticks because the skins are too fragile. And similarly, don't bang on them really hard like you would bang on a conga, or not that anyone bangs on a conga. Of course, they stroke delicately the conga, luring the tones from the drum. But if you were to bang it, don't do it with the tablas, because it's going to damage them quite a bit. Try to keep them evenly tuned. I'm going to look at the tuning in a minute. One other note, just to mention, is that Indians will never touch the drums with their feet. So if you've got Indian friends, or you're performing in an Indian situation, you'd have to bear in mind that it's really, really bad news to touch the drums with your feet. So don't go there. So now we're going to look at the tuning of the drum. This is a very important implement in the whole fray. It's not a toffee hammer. So basically, this is your main tuning device. Now, first of all, I would add the extreme tuning is done with the pegs. So we're pretty low there. Now, So by hitting down, what I tend to do is hold the hammer kind of very close to the end here, not like you would be banging a nail in or something, because you're going to lose control and damage the drum. So I tend to hold it quite close to the top of the hammer in this way. Now hitting downwards, normally tabla players would tune to the tin stroke, the stroke on the inner ring, or the na stroke. I prefer tuning to the na stroke, but you can hear as I hit down, you can hear the pitch change. Sometimes you're going to need to hit heavily with the pegs, as I did a little earlier, to get the tuning up. Sometimes you're going to need to maybe take it off. You can see that this is on 4 straps for most of the pegs. In fact, that's 3. So it might be too high here, and you might need to take off one of the straps. Now this is tuned to D. This tabla, you'll hear with the pitch tuning that it's clearly tuned to D. Well, it might have gone out with the lights during the... A little bit flat because I've tuned it. You just go round, you're hitting and doing that. I would recommend this tuning thing, which is a Pitch Pro actually, and that's a pretty good tuning reference for when you're tuning the drum. So then it's just fine tuning during performance, and you're away to go. Good luck. Any questions, email me through my website, petelockett.com, or